Right, welcome to another episode of FISHFAB. So this episode, obviously we probably guessed we are standing in front of the WR1, so that's what we're going to be doing this episode. We've got a few mechanical things left to do. I'm going to try and get all the mechanical things done first, and then we can sort of do the body work, as in putting the bumpers back on and putting the wings on and the headlights. That can all be done. It'll be the next episode. So some of the projects we've got to try and get done is bolt all the calipers on. They've all been sent away, refurb. They look brilliant, like brand new. We're going to bleed the brakes, but I'm not going to show you that because it's boring as hell. We've got the prop shaft to do. We've got the exhaust to do. We've got a nut and bolt check because we haven't been on this project for, I don't know, I think it was before Christmas. So we are going to go through all the nuts and bolts just to double check where we are. Maybe if it was a race car or something, we could have marked them all, but because we're trying to keep it sort of OE looking, we're not going to put a pen all over it. But so we're just going to do a nut and bolt check as we go along. So every time we've moved on from one place to the next, we're going to make sure the bolts are done up. And obviously when the car's done a few hundred miles, we'll have it back and do a nut and bolt check anyway, just as a safety precaution to make sure everything's okay. So let's get on with it. We're not going to do a mechanical refurbishment on these. Everything seems alright. There was never a knock beforehand, so rather than spend a massive amount of money on getting new drive shafts, we've decided that we're going to use what we've got. So, but saying that, we have decided that the CV boots are probably not going to be reliable after this. So we've actually, because when you take them off, you move them above and beyond what they're used to doing in the car, the chances of these splitting when they go back in the car because they've been stretched is high. And the last thing you want to do is A, take the car off the road just after you put it back together, or B, be cleaning graphite grease all off the bottom of your car, because it is the most horrible stuff to clean out ever. So the principle of what we're going to be doing in this episode is stripping them all down, cleaning all the old grease out, make sure everything looks all right, refurbishment and paint all the parts, new CV boots, new grease, put them back together, and then obviously the 4 drive shafts will be ready to put them back in the car. So I think this will really drive the project forward at the end. So that's what we're going to do. Let's strip them down and get on with it. Right, so we're up to the point where everything's all built up, but it's still loose. So it means we've got to torque everything up. Because of the way the bushes are, they actually need to be under load. So what the plan is at the minute is we're going to put the wheels on, and I've got some skates. So hopefully we're going to drop the car down off the ramp, put them on the skates. The skates will allow the wheels to sort of spread out and the weight should sit. We might give it a bit of a bump to get it to settle, and then we can do all the suspension bolts up to Subaru's torque specifications, and then that's a big job out of the way. So all the suspension at the front will be done, and all the suspension at the back will be done, or the back and then the front. Make sure it's out of gear, yeah, so. Right, the WR1 finished. So that is the first project that's been finished that has come from my channel. So it's really good. It's quite a pinnacle moment. So that's the first one out the door. Paul's really happy with it. I'm really happy with it. It went off for an MOT. They were really happy with it. It did get tracked, obviously, because we took the whole car apart and put it back together. It did go for tracking. And obviously it passed with the MOT and everything went really well. You can see that it started up on the button straight away. That wasn't some sort of cutting of YouTube. It did start up on the button, but be aware that obviously you'll see that probably when we were fitting the fuel tank, I said about priming it a few times. We primed it 6 or 7 times to make sure there was fuel pressure in the pipes. I had to make sure that all the new pipework that we fitted back didn't leak. On these Subarus, to get the fuel tank out, you have to take all the diff out and everything is a big job. So we needed to make sure at that point that nothing leaked. We didn't want to start the car because there was still quite a lot of intercoolers off and all that lot. So the best thing we could do at the time was to pressurise the system and make sure we had no leaks. We also primed it a few more times before we started, hence why it started on the button. So there wasn't no waiting for no fuel to get to the injectors. We'd already primed the system quite a few times. It's self-bleeding, hence why it literally started at the button. But that's great. So it started on the button, which just proves that we must have got most of it right. They're the really important moments, because if they don't start straight away, you have touched everything underneath the car, so it becomes a real daunting moment when it doesn't start. But luckily it did start, and it gave us a lot of sort of encouragement to move on. So anyway, so it went off at MOT and everything's been brilliant really. So there was a few little niggles here and there, nothing that I'm going to video. You can't expect to do a restoration project like that where you've touched everything on the car and not expect to find some niggles. There is a few little odds and sods that the car's going to come back for. The exhaust is not quite where we want it to be. It's making a little rattle. There's a few of the bushes that we couldn't get the OE ones, and we had to maybe supplement them with something else. Some of them are a little bit harder than we probably wish them to be, so they are going to come back and we'll change them, but nothing that we're probably going to make a video for, because they are little odds and sods jobs. I think what would be really important is the longevity of the finishes of the product. Like some of the bits are powder coated and painted. It'll be really interesting to see, maybe in a year or 2 years time we'll do another video and see how much some of these finishes have actually prevented it from rust and what they look like. So I think that'll be really interesting. We'll have a revisit. I personally haven't had any long-term experience on what these finishes look like you know, after miles of use. It'll be interesting, you know, what chips and what gets damaged easily. So that'll be really interesting. That'll be good for me as well. I've had little experience of what sort of finishes work well underneath a car in that sort of environment. I'm sure the people, the garages that do it regularly, they have picked which sort of finishes work really well and which don't through experience. Well, I haven't got that yet, not in that sort of underneath environment. So that'll be a really important part to see in the future. So hopefully maybe I'll make a video of that and I'll just sort of share with you what worked and what didn't. And then obviously if you're doing something very similar, you might be able to use that as information. I've taken information from what other people have done and sort of took their advice, and that's the finishes that the car has got. So moving on, really, the WR1's finished. The next one is the Time Attack Subaru, which I've already started, and you would have seen some videos with that hopefully. And obviously when they're finished, there is another project I've got going, which I think will be really interesting. So I am going to finish the Subaru. I'm not going to run them side by side. So the new project will start, and I think a lot of you will be really interested in that. So I'm looking forward to getting on that. So if you could support the channel by liking and subscribing and ringing the bell and all the other things you're supposed to say. And hopefully we'll see you on the next one. Cheers.